mind bend, non-ordinary and extraordinary states of consciousness for mind bend creative.
Part of the show is a big part of the show is non-ordinary and extraordinary states of consciousness. That's the subheading for the title of the show, Mind Bend, non-ordinary, extraordinary states of consciousness. It started with the work that I was doing as a journalist in psychedelics. And so most of the conversations I have with people, and most of the initial guests were people who were somehow working with or advocates for or veterans of the psychedelic landscape. And whenever you have an interest or a topic that human beings are aware of, anybody who's aware of that topic and participating in that topic is bringing with them everything else from their lives, right? And when we talk about the psyche, there are a number of phenomena that human beings experience which directly affect the psyche and can reflect the psyche outwards. And there are practices such as nutrition, which can influence the psyche and the wellness of a person and their community, their family. And something that I think you and I agree has still been taboo, like the discussion of psychedelics has been, is this power that human beings possess, this magic that human beings carry with them, which is our sexuality, our sensuality, our sense of intimacy, and what that means to human beings at different points in our evolution and in different parts of the world, depending on what your upbringing is, what your viewpoints, how your viewpoints are formed, experiences that happen to you. So it's always been my interest to bring in sex and sexuality as a component of this show, as something to say you're getting ready to go and have an ayahuasca experience, or you're getting ready to have an MDMA experience. Is there a guide? Is there somebody else around? Will someone have hands on you? Will no one have hands on you? How do you express yourself? What may come up? And we talk a lot about trauma too, and sexuality is an area where we can have particular types of wounding, psychologically, psychospiritually, that can leave impressions and affect our lives, right? So I think the discussion around sex and sexuality and sensual energy is a huge part and probably under-recognized as we set the groundwork for meaningful and healthful psychedelic experiences. So it's a pleasure to visit with you on the show today as somebody who has kind of tapped into this space um, and coming from personal experience, and really you can express your mission very eloquently. And I think that's going to help inform this ongoing conversation. So why don't you tell our audience about what you do and how you found yourself being able to speak with me about it today?
Yes, well, I'm Gina Joseph, and I'm an intimacy coach, a sensualist, and also I'm a yogi. And my experience when it came to discovering sensuality and being able to hold the space to offer coaching on embracing sensuality and intimacy honestly came from my experiences, my personal experience. And you hit everything on the head. I felt like that sex is such this big part of the human experience in general. So I really felt like that there should be this huge part in wellness, and especially when it comes to different aspects of wellness, even when it comes to medicinal and psychedelics and even physical elements, spiritual elements. But given my background, I was born in Maryland. I was raised by a mom from Trinidad and Tobago. And growing up, there was, especially when it comes to the identity that I was faced with, I felt like that a lot of my identities wrapped around the essence of purity when it came to sex. So, of course, growing up in a household, there was this pressure, and I don't think that this pressure was intentionally placed. I do think that it was culturally placed. Of when it comes to women's sexuality, there's an essence of purity. There's this essence of gatekeeping that needs to be. And so I've always had that notion in my mind that in the beginning of my sexuality journey that I was just a vessel of purity. Unfortunately, which have led me into the strong woman that I am today. There were experiences that I did face where I was introduced to sexuality in the way that I would not have liked. And with that, there was this moment of what was my purpose here on, what's my dharma, what's my purpose? And I think that when I was in my teens, I definitely had those questions. But with me being introduced to sexual acts very early, mixed with this pressure of maintaining purity, I didn't really have the essence of understanding my body. I didn't even know the parts of my body. I didn't know what I am supposed to feel during sex. What was the pleasure? The only thing that I knew was I had boobs, I had butt, and I'm supposed to just keep it pure. And so during my journey of rebellion and rediscovering myself in my early 20s, that's when I felt this sense of like exploration, of exploring, different parts of me. And one of them was the biggest one, my sexuality. And during that journey, I started to learn things about myself that I didn't know. But then also, I uncovered a lot of shadows that I felt, and I used my sex as a time to, I would say, conceal it in ways. I realized that with sex, there was this level of fulfillment that I wanted. There was an essence of wanting to people please when it comes to giving pleasure. And that was the first time that I started to connect sex when it comes to my internal body, my mental body, my spiritual body, and even when it comes to trauma. And I would separate those in so many ways because at that time, as I was discovering myself, felt disembodied. So I started to really find my interest in sensuality through yoga. Yoga was the first time that I found this connection between my body, my breath, and my mind. Doing each pose and understanding how, with every breath, I can relax and I can ease into every pose. With every movement, I was able to feel that connection. I felt more embodied. So I was yoga teaching for a while, from 2018 to 2019. So I would say about when I was in my 21 years old. And then COVID hit and I completely stopped. And during that time, I felt like that it was just such this explorational journey because I was able to really understand, Gina, what does your body feel? What does your body want? What does your body need? But I was still discovering. I was still breaking stigmas and ideologies that I had around sex. And unfortunately, the only thing that I felt like I was able to learn about sex was porn. And porn is quite not like as realistic as we think. So during my journey, I started to really establish practices of meditation, of breath, and especially when it came to my sexual partners. And I felt this ease, I felt this comfortability of being able to embody and embrace myself when I am having sex, where back then I was disembodied in so many ways because I didn't really take that initiative at that time to learn about myself. But it's kind of like we work with what we have. And throughout that journey, I started to read up on sensuality and sexuality, and it was so nuanced. And also there was this big liberation of people, of women, of queers, of so many people from all different forms of identity being able to talk about sex. And thank goodness we have social media where we see a lot of topics. And so I started to discover, and I realized, wow, this person thinks the same as me. This person thinks the same as me. So as I was circling through what my sexuality is, when I was circling through what my sensuality was, thank goodness that there is beautiful communities and different topics and different books to read to really educate. And so when I read The Body Keeps a Score, that really showed me the importance and value of sexual health and how sex is not just this transient, transactional experience. It's an embodiment. It's what started life. It's what has given this whole abundance of what we have today as a human race. And so it wasn't until I would say last year that I really started to get into the deep work of connecting sensuality and blending it with wellness, then also blending it into my experiences and not separating it all. And so far, I was able to attract so many people who felt that same urge to discover themselves without any shame or guilt or any sense of not feeling comfortable to speak about, what they want in sensuality, what they want to give out, what they want to transmit. And so it's been this beautiful journey as I'm still discovering myself, as I'm still learning so many aspects of my sensuality and sexuality. It's also just been this beautiful journey of just witnessing and seeing this shift of overall liberation because, reiterating this again, sex is such a big part of the human experience. And I think that growing up, I've always seen it separate or taboo or far off. So I have this dharma now, this passion of blending it together and to know that your sexual health is just as important as your mental health, your physical health. And it's this full circle of embodiment.
Thank you so much. Tell us about how yoga works in this awareness, how yoga works to further clarify for you matters pertaining to your sexuality.
Yes. So when I practice yoga, that was like the first time that I felt the connection between my body and my breath and how I felt in my body. Definitely within my sexual experiences in the past, there was this moment where I didn't really feel disembodied or also mixed into my spiritual journey. I've always wanted to find a way to feel out of the body. I've always wanted to find a way to disassociate from my physical body.
What did that look
And
like for you? What did that process of dissociating from your physical body look like for you? What form did it take? Like, are we talking about like partying, over drinking, drugs? What are we?
definitely,
Uh-huh.
definitely partying, over drinking, abusing certain medicines that were so helpful for me. And that can be a helpful experience. Going into psychedelics has changed my life in so many ways. But there was a moment in my life where I feel like I didn't put as much intention to what was given to me. And so it was an abuse. And I think that as I started my spiritual journey, there was so many things that I was uncovering, right? Sexual abuse, feeling like, oh, this is so much trauma. Also, when you're in that spiritual journey, that generational trauma, those experiences. And then also you're able to feel the energy off of people. It's like definitely not butterflies and rainbows. And so my goal was to try to escape that feeling as much as possible. So disassociating. So definitely taking a lot of drugs, definitely finding ways of escapism. And I also use sex as one of them. because for that moment, I wasn't thinking about anything and I would completely disassociate with my body for those times of me having sex. But with yoga, that was the first time that I really had to sit within my body, which was uncomfortable for me in the beginning. Being able, when you're doing these poses and you're just stuck there and you're like, oh, I want to move, or when the class is like that hour and you still have to move and still have to keep going, it was very interesting. But that was the first time that I really experienced embodiment, and I didn't know what embodiment was. And finding that union between the breath and my movements and my body, which relates so much to my sensual experiences now because I'm so tapped into my body. And even when I feel signs of pleasure, even for instance, a orgasm, orgasms start in the brain, but it really, I would say, gets more ignited with the breath when we breathe, sometimes when we hold our breath. And I remember when I had my previous sensual experiences and I didn't feel pleased and I would never speak up about it, I would hold my breath. I would just sit there and just not breathe. But I realized that when I'm just breathing and really focusing on the breath, I feel so much more present in the experience and I feel so much comfort within my body. So I wasn't aware back then, but yoga was definitely an introduction to everything that is flourished now in my purpose and what I want to offer to the world.
And you feel like a big part of that purpose overall is as an intimacy guide and sensualist, maybe an
Yes.
author on the subject as well, someone who can encapsulate their thoughts and into material that other people can benefit from.
Oh my gosh, yes. That is definitely one of my goals. I would love to write a book about my journey. I've developed such this strength of not being ashamed of my story. And I definitely know that we're all unique in our special ways, but there's a lot of people that share the same stories as me, or the same questions, or the
Mm.
same trials and tribulations, but also glories too. And my goal is to write a book. And also, I am hosting a retreat next year where, people can be able to experience, heal, to grow, and to really feel that embodiment of who they are. And I'm so excited to roll that out. And it's going to have stretch therapy, yoga, a sensuality workshop, dancing, to just be able to feel freedom. I feel like that sensuality for me is such this beautiful essence of liberation as well. But my goal is to definitely write a book one day, to definitely hold workshops, because we need that. And also, I would love to be an advocate of making topics like this accessible. I'm so blessed that we're able to have the beauty of the internet, the beauty of social media. But I think growing up for me, especially growing up in neighborhoods that weren't luxurious, let's just say, that were impoverished, there was no introduction to wellness modalities, to different ideologies, to even like health. And it wasn't until I lived in New York and I really stepped out of the box and explored myself and met different people that I was able to be introduced to this. And so I want to be able to also be accessible to, my community, Black and brown communities, but then also, LGBTQ communities, and also communities that don't have access to wealth or don't have access to be able to take a yoga class or to be able to book a sensualist or an intimacy coach.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's something we should touch on, like these yoga classes in particular, whether or not it's accurate, I think you could imagine that there's a stigma around that being reserved for a certain socioeconomic class of people, the people who have the disposable income and even, I don't know, the free time or the encouragement to even watch a podcast or listen to a conversation or find this book, people get stuck in very small circles, right? Especially when they're locked into being impoverished, when they're locked into an impoverished socioeconomic position. So that is going to continue to be, and it's one of the things that comes up in the discussion around psychedelics as well. How do these therapies, how do these modalities, how do these wisdom teachings find their way to people who aren't on the front lines of receiving them first? Who may not be the first people you think of who are showing up for these events. What do you think strategic? I know you're just in the early days of envisioning all this, but what do you think strategically it would look like to take these discussions, to take workshops or even literature to communities that aren't familiar?
I think the first step is the most physical, obvious element is going there. I think for me, what kept me into that box, especially in my early childhood, was not physically seeing the yoga spaces, not physically seeing the healing spaces, not essentially being there.
Yeah.
Now I'm seeing that, in various neighborhoods and very underprivileged communities, that there are establishments and there's people that are working hard to do that. But I think that it was really hard for me to have it in close proximity, that I had to travel out from Baltimore to New York and to discover these places. And it took a lot to really step out on my own in my way of alternative thinking
Mm,
to have that. And I think just physically showing up in those spaces is the first step with it
mm.
all.
Baltimore was where you spent your adolescence?
Yes. So I was born in Maryland, and growing up, my mom and I, we moved so much. We moved from, I would say, I've lived in 12 different places and I transferred to 11 different schools throughout my 12 years of schooling. And so in my high school adolescence, I spent time in Baltimore. And it wasn't until I was 18, there was something about New York that I just loved, which was the alternativeness. The culture was different because I felt like I was like a black sheep in my environment. And so I took it upon myself to move to New York, and the rest was history.
Fantastic. Um, It's funny to hear you say, thank goodness for social media. Most of the conversations I've been monitoring lately as a podcast producer, I work on a number of other podcasts, and several of them are like health and wellness podcasts, right? And the majority of the conversation, I think it's safe to say, I think it's fair to say that the majority of the conversation around social media is around the deleterious effects that social media can have, especially, and I'm inclined to think this way as well. I'm of a different age group than you are. I'm older than you are. So I didn't come up with social media. I don't have the same relationship to social media that people who are your age and similar may. And I think it's important to try to look at pros and cons and positive potential and negative potential and everything. But the majority of the conversations I'm listening to now are around the addictive nature and the relationship to dopamine specifically, and how we are attached to affirmations that come as dopamine hits, which are manufactured by companies who know exactly what kind of tools they're utilizing in order to keep you using the platform, right? But your take, just very candidly, was thank goodness for social media. And I'm not saying this to be contrarian, but um, in this moment, tell me about what you think you've seen be benefit to you and maybe peers, as byproducts of social media. What has social media allowed specifically? And I think I know, but just like to hear it from you. Talk to me about what makes it something you would say thank goodness for.
Yes, I definitely had I would say, boundaries with social media, because social media is can definitely be a loophole. It can definitely be a place where you don't feel as confident, where there's comparisons involved and addiction is involved for sure. So I definitely do want to acknowledge that fully. Uh, Growing up in the social media age, I feel like for me and for my peers, I've seen such this, I would say, accessibility and opportunities. I felt like that when it comes to the social media age, I felt like that a lot of people that I've seen have been able to take it and run with it and be able to create their businesses and to rise and platform. And I think that it contributed to the diversity of the business entrepreneurs that we have now. And I think that social media definitely had a big claim to it because in your social media, you can be whoever you want to be. It's this instant marketing for you to propose yourself, for you to create yourself, for you to rewire. So growing up in the social media age, I've been able to see people who started from straight zero to becoming, entrepreneurs, entertainment stars, designers, all of these things because they were able to utilize a social media tool and not have a middleman of marketing and be able to platform. And I think that's why now there is such this big boom of beautiful businesses, especially diverse businesses as well. And so there is this beauty of social media that I felt like has helped me in so many ways, especially when it comes to connections and also for learning. I've been able to discover certain aspects and certain perspectives and ideals, and even something as simple as I'm vegan, right? Growing up, I didn't know what vegan was. Veganism was definitely in a Caribbean household. It was very odd, but very odd. But to be able to go on social media and see a creator who is making Caribbean vegan meals, and making it so accessible for me, it's like, whoa, there is this level of freedom, but then freedom of building and creating a business, but also freedom of information. So I think the downfall of social media is this access of information where I definitely can feel overstimulated because we're in this information age and because information comes so easily to me now, that there is this level of like, okay, this is too much dopamine hits, this is too much. And but also we do have to recognize the beauty of what social media has brought for everyone, including myself. With everything in life, there is this negative things, but then there's also their benefits. And I think that social media is definitely one of them.
Thank you. Thank you for laying it out like that. I appreciate that. It's great to have the dialogue, represented all over. So GinaJoseph.me is your website, and the homepage says your sensual liberation journey awaits. So you've gone on a sensual liberation journey yourself, and this is to introduce people to the idea that you can go on a journey, and you're somebody who can help facilitate that. So if I go to offerings, the first item on offerings is sacred breath work. It's a 60-minute session. The intricate dance of your body and breath is a testament to your essence. Talk to me about sacred breath work. Who's that available to? Who might be hung up about trying it? What kind of positive benefit do you believe it could have for a person?
Yes, well, sacred breath is very open to anyone who is human because we do need the breath to essentially survive. So anyone who's human can join. And what I loved about breath work, and of course, everything starts with the breath, right? And I think that my breath has been this beautiful connection of feeling embodied. So especially when I'm moving, when I'm doing things, when I know if I can just breathe and just be able to tap into my body, I feel more centered, I feel more present. Breath work has been this beautiful journey for me. When I do breath work and also when I facilitate breath work, there is this beautiful, of course, embodiment within myself, but then with the people around me, there's this unity. It was, I remember when I was doing a session with someone, and even most times when we're doing the breath work together, we're in unison and subconsciously with our breath, and we don't even know. And with sacred breath work, it's that opportunity to be able to just connect simply to the breath and honoring, how your body feels with certain breathing techniques. And with those, uh, we go through various, I would say, journeys of the breath, whether it's starting off slow with 4 count breathing, finding that intensity with lion's breath and breath of fire. And once we feel that height of exhaustion or fatigue or fire built up in our bodies, then we have that responsibility to bask in it, which is so similar to sex. When we are having our intimate encounters, when we're having our sexual encounters, and we reach into that climax, which it definitely relates to our breathing when we go into those climaxes, there is this beauty of being present within that climax and being able to feel, okay, how do I feel in my body? What's the sensations, whether it's through touch, whether it's through sound, whether it's through taste, whether it's through smell, all of those things that are needed to be present. I'm feeling that, I'm relishing in it, and now it's time to release, to let it go. And that's why I love sacred breathwork, because I wanted to create a beautiful session for people who aren't really feeling ready yet to explore through movements like trauma informed yoga, but also feel like they don't really want to lower their boundaries. And I know with body work and massages, that's definitely a very, I would say, boundaries do have to be lower. Whereas with breath work, you are utilizing your own body, you are utilizing your own breath, and you're able to experience those sensations of sensuality and pleasure in a safe space, which your safe space should always be within. So, with the sacred breath work, I really love to offer it to anybody who breathes. And it's so needed because it's very much connected when it comes to having a very fruitful sexual experience in itself.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the menu for offerings on the website is trauma-informed yoga. So what's the process of having a trauma-informed yoga session in a nutshell?
Yes. So, of course, as yoga, there are definitely asanas. There are some asanas that really do open up the body, that really helps ground. But then there's certain poses that can be brought up. So, background, I'll give a little antidote. I used to be so nervous doing Happy Baby. For those who don't know what Happy Baby is, you lay down, and when you're laying down, you're grabbing your ankles and you're rocking like a baby. I did not like that pose for a while. I felt so vulnerable and I felt so open and I just felt unsafe. And when I was researching, I realized that there are certain aspects and elements of the yoga. Of course, yoga does can bring up so many things, but also there are some essence of trauma that can be brought up and that can be expressed within the practice. And so with trauma informed yoga, I am more intentional when it comes to adjustments, when it comes to even the practice of finding ease and comfort, but also safety within the practice. I know that I've heard stories where people have done classes and they didn't really feel as safe, or maybe the adjustments were just a little weird. No shame to any teachers, but we all have gone through things that can remind us of, oh, this bad experience or this experience. So with trauma informed yoga, I implement different poses as well as adjustments that are safe within the body. And it's a great introduction, or a great I would say additive going out of sacred breath work, because sacred breath work, you connect with the body. But now with trauma informed yoga, you're connecting your breath and your body. And now you're utilizing yourself even more as a safer space. And that's what trauma informed yoga is all about.
Do you have a discussion? Is it a discussion that precedes the session to identify what the trauma has been for? Do you get into like specific traumatic occurrences in a person's life and then guide them into yoga that makes sense with that in mind?
Yes, I hold an open space. I feel like when it comes to discussing trauma, there was a moment, especially in the beginning of my journey, where I was like, I'm a vessel for you. Open up to me now. Tell me everything.
Yeah.
But I realized that it creates pressure for
Right.
people.
Yeah.
So there's times where I will have clients that will come to me and say, hey, this is what I'm going through. And I'm able to curate the asana sequence on the spot that I feel like will help. But then also there's times where they'll just come in quiet and be like, I want to do this. Or don't even say nothing at all. And just be like, I just want to do a regular standard yoga, because people's trauma responses, like they want to just close in and they don't really want to be able to express. So usually after the session, I set aside time for me and the client. I don't know why the client just seems so distant. Me and my friend, I would say, it just feels so close. Talk about their history and hold space. So when it comes to the trauma informed yoga, I structure a lot the sequence in itself, but as far as the person being able to share their trauma, I leave it up to them, but I know I hold space with them throughout. Even if during the middle, where I've had that sometimes, the middle of the session, they're like, oh, something came up for me, I need to talk about it. I
Mm.
hold space
Hmm.
because I realize that our experiences and our traumas and things that are we're reflecting in the past just comes up out the blue. There's things that triggers us, but it just comes up. And I feel like for me as a facilitator, I have to be able to hold space throughout and through, and being able to sit in their journey, which is amazing. I have this might go on a tangent, but I remember when I would do shroom ceremonies, when I would be a participant in the shroom ceremonies. And what I loved is that the facilitators, they held space for me in my ebbs and flows of cries and of highs. And there was a moment I would walk into these ceremonies like, okay, am I supposed to tell them everything right now? Or like, I don't want to tell them, or what's going on? And the fact that they held so much space for me, and I seen others hold so much space, but then also I started to see, which is such an interesting concept, the diversity of people's experiences revolved around trauma. And so, in the way that they communicate it and in the way that they process it, some people cry. Some people are like, I need to hold it in. Some people express it through rage. And all of those things shows how much, as a collective, as a human race, we're so uniquely different. And I realized that when I held space for others. So, with the trauma informed yoga, for any person, any friends who comes in, I always recommend, this is your time to express whenever you do. I will hold that space for you while we're moving our bodies, while you're moving your bodies. And this is what I'm here for.
Thank you so much. Before we move to the next item on the offering list, which is intuitive sacred touch and body work, I wanted to touch upon this. I would imagine that someone coming to you for trauma-informed yoga, you being a intimacy guide and sensualist, or however you're positioning yourself publicly, and whatever your website will say or whatever your business card says, um, I think we could kind of I'll dumb it down and say that a lot of people are coming with sexual hangups or baggage in their sexual past, okay? And I think that maybe sometimes trauma can inform sexual behavior. I think in my own example, I think that a lot of my unskillful decisions around sexual choices and sexual behavior was informed by trauma. I feel like I personally, for a period of my life in my early 20s and late teens, did not handle my sexual energy and sexual capacity skillfully. And I think that it had to do with processing things that had happened to me, which are fair to say are traumatic by my personal standards and maybe by, anybody else's standard, right? So, um, are you do you talk about that? Are you seeing that? Is that part of your own experience? I mean, I'm talking about going out and being incredibly promiscuous and reckless sexually, and then sort of where I'm at now as a human being later in life is like looking back and being like, who was that person? What was their mentality? How did they make those decisions? Where was the forethought? Where was the protection? Where was the care and the compassion for myself and for others? And I do think that it's reasonable to suggest that a lot of the violence that we see in the world can be potentially tied to a misunderstanding of our sexuality and of sexual energy and of the expression of that, whether it's repressed by some kind of tradition or whether it's repressed by just straight up bigotry or whatever. Like, talk to me about like this notion specifically of improper or unskillful action coming from trauma that's related to sexuality.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. I definitely, through my own experience and the experiences that I've listened to with others, definitely the experiences that we have as far as our sexual connections and how we show up in those acts of intimacies does reflect a lot in the trauma of my personal life. I would love to share my personal experience with that. Of course, growing up, I was sexually abused. And so for me, a lot of and a lot of the things that I will do while I was sexually abused, I was told what to do. So it was like, hey, do this thing or do this thing. And so subconsciously, when I started to explore sex, which I definitely misused it, I was a performer in a sense. My goal was to just give my partner the maximum pleasure and really loved being told what to do, but then also to sit in this level of like, I don't want to express myself. I want somebody to express it for me. And for me, that was I would say, the effects of trauma on me in my life. However, though, there are some people that sees that as, a pleasure to them or a kink to them. So I don't want to negate it or I would say demonize that experience of the sexual journey. But for me, I knew that that was my relation to it based off my trauma. And also, I felt like that sex was a way at first for me to feel that maximum connection with somebody and that maximum desire. And I think that's where my sexual addiction started to come about, because for those moments, I felt it was only me. I was the only one desired. I was the only one that was loved. All the attention's on me. And also, because I love people in general, that was the quickest way to feel their maximum, feel that maximum connection. So the moments were great, but what happened, the moments were great in my adult sex life were great, but what really traumatized me was the aftermaths, because I held it in so much tight regard and that was my way of connecting with people. I expect for people to continue to connect with me in that way, or to love me more. They've seen me in my bare body, in my vulnerable state, and I realized that that's not the case, you know? And that's what led me into a depression, but also led me into craving more sex and more sensual experiences, because that was my high. That was my time where I felt nourished and loved. And so it's so interesting because a lot of the stories that I would hear, there is a relation to that, but then there's also a relation of I am terrified about sex. I don't like sex. I don't even want to step into that. And I had that period where, especially in my sexuality, when I will feel like, okay, maybe I don't want to have sex with this person, or I just don't want to have sex at all. I don't feel turned on, because of that period of my life with feeling shame or feeling doubt of what sex is supposed to be. And there is this beautiful, but all like this beautiful connection that we do see, that how we process things in our wellness journey, and also our embodiment within ourselves does reflect in our sexual experiences. And I do believe 100% firmly that our mental health is so connected with our sexual health, our sexuality, our expression of that. Like I've said so many times before, our sexuality is a big part of ourselves. And of course, we can say that there's no such thing as identity, identities in the ego, but we do live in a physical world where our identities do play a part, and our sexual identity and our sexual expression is a part of that. So when it is repressed, or when we feel like there's no safe spaces to express it fully, or to even process any experiences that we may not feel comfortable with, or we're still questioning, there is this sense of trying to find a release in other forms, which can be violence to ourselves or violence to others. Um, because the act of sex in general is such this energetic exchange, this energetic transmission. So, energy can be transferred in so many ways and expressed in so many ways too. And so when I hear the stories of, people who I've come across with it, and also myself, I really found this core common thread of the importance of sexual health and how it relates to so many aspects of our mental health, how we deal with the world, how we view others, but also most importantly, how we view ourselves.
Well, you're able to embrace this role, and it, from my perspective, it seems like you have found a clarity of vision, which I'm thrilled for you. I want like everybody I would ever care about to have a clarity of vision for themselves. I feel like people are so much happier and healthier when they're able to, find something that they really are passionately dedicated to. And and I always enjoy meeting those types of people. Um, so I feel like there's a safety in that. And it would just make sense then that this being a field of personal importance and resonance for you, you have the spirit that wants to engage with others and make a better world too. And that's obvious. So um, grateful that you're putting in the energy and the work as you are. The item on the offering that I wanted to touch with that background given, and thank you so much for sharing, the intuitive sacred touch slash body work. So this is kind of what I think a layperson might think of a intimacy coach or sexual guide or sensuality expert or whatever it is. Like, okay, so what is sex about it? Where's the sex in it? Am I going to have sex? Are they going to teach me how to have sex? Or is this about having a longer orgasm? Or is it important for me to have an orgasm? Or what should I even expect from my experience of sex? If I have one partner who's someone I'm married to in a traditional sense? Like, is my goal to give them and pleasure and experience pleasure myself? Or, I know it's not a one size fits all thing, but you are engaging professionally on one of the most intimate levels of a person's life. So this tier of intuitive sacred touch and body work and touch also, some people don't even like to be hugged, right? We shake hands or we fist bump. There's touch involved in our lives, and some of us are inclined to be embrace that a little more than others. So if someone is coming to you for intuitive sacred touch body work, what what might they expect and what have people brought to the table when they've worked with you on that level?
Yes, and I'm so happy that you asked that question because the amount of DMs and inquiries that I get with those same questions is where's the sex? Where is it?
Sure, sure.
So I'm so
But then you
happy.
can understand how, like, obviously that's like a lot on, people's minds.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. And so I'm so happy to be able to explain it. Definitely when it came to my journey, when it came to sensuality and sex itself, I always thought that sex was the physical element, right? Just the physical. And a lot of people that do ask me that, it's the physical aspect of it itself. But I realized, wait, there's a sensuality component too. And the root word of sensuality is senses. So, with the intuitive sacred touch and body work, we go over the five senses in our bodies to feel this bond between all five senses to get into embodiment and work, which does relate to really activating our sensuality, feeling more free, and feeling more comfortable in our sensuality. And of course, the five senses: sight, smell, taste, and feel, right? And that's what the body work incorporates. So, in the sessions, of course, when it comes to feel and touch, of course, it will be deep tissue massage to relax the muscles, but then also relaxing the nerve endings. So, I do incorporate feathers that help with stimulating the nerve system to feel that tingle, to feel that its sensation, because I realize that with the body, there's so many layers that we have. We have our bones, we have our joints, we have our muscles, but then we also have our nerves. So during the physical part, which will be the massage part, we're activating all of those layers. So, stretching out our joints, massaging the muscles to help with releasing lactic acid and tension, but then also stimulating our nerves with the touch of feathers, the touch of gentleness. And that reflects a lot when it comes to our sexual journeys and our sensual journeys, because you're able to understand the layers of touch, not only with yourself, but also with your partner. So you're able to understand, wait, I can stimulate my partner in different ways, not just that physical aspect that I think is surface level, but those dynamics within that. Then, of course, we move on to smell, which, of course, is aromatherapy. We have aphrodisiacs. There's certain scents that we smell that may make us feel relaxed, make us feel energized, make us feel love. So I incorporate scents like lang lang, for example, rose. Every time when I smell a rose, I feel this aphrodisiac of sensuality and calm, and also chocolate. Chocolate, the smell of chocolate just makes me feel even more just calm and more in my sensual being. So I like to incorporate scents, because aromatherapy is also so important, because of course when people cook, or if you think about it, usually on dates and on like different forms of foreplay, there's always a treat, there's always food involved, because it's that natural aphrodisiac. So then also incorporating those layers within intimacy. Then once we go on to smell, then we incorporate sight. So usually when I do my sessions, when I host my sessions, I incorporate LED lights, because there's certain light fixtures or certain elements of light that reduces calm, whether it's hints of red, hints of blue. Well, red kind of gives passion and desire, but blue, I will say, give calm. And even the LED. So going back to social media for a quick second, we're exposed to blue light all the time, and we don't really get exposed to red light. So when you think about it, a candle emits so much red light, which is calming and soothing to the eyes, because we're always exposed to blue light all the time.
Mm.
So we realize the power of sight and how that really affects our sensuality. And even going in a more plain level, we want to feel attracted to our partner, right? And what we see to have that experience. And then, of course, the last thing is taste. So, of course, I incorporate any edible oil, any edible coconut oil that, of course, someone will be able to try on themselves. And then also, I do use it's pretty much like a mint. It's a mint, but then also a rose flower, I would say, mouthwash, because after the massage, I know for me, I always feel dry. My lips feel dry. I feel kind of congested. So I give them a tincture, which is, of course, incorporated with mint and rose water. And so when you're swishing that in your mouth, you feel this sense of stimulation within your nerves, but then also this numbness and coolness, and also being able to feel more hydrated and more great after the session. Because I know after, when I do massages, I feel so like dry, like, oh, I need water, I need something. And it's such just beauty, because again, we're able to explore the layers and the parts of sensuality, how you're able to find pleasure through sight, which I feel like is the number one key component of engaging in sensuality and sexuality. What we see, what we watch, what we feel, it brings us pleasure. Then being able to incorporate the smell, the aromas, what it's reminding you of, what is resonating with you. Then, of course, incorporating touch, which is such a common aspect of engaging in sex, but then also the layers of it. So, how does my joints feel? How does my muscles feel? How does my nerves feel? And then also with incorporating taste, how my taste bud feels, what different foods or different things really stimulates me. And then the then of course the sound. And the sound is my favorite part because I do play hand pans and I play sound bowls. So with that stimulation of sound, there's this calm that washes over a person's body to be able to feel that sense of ease. And that's why we have, romantic music, or music is soothing. Or if you think about it, when people go into their intimate acts, not all, but most play music because it's so soothing to the soul. So also the sound of it, and also being able to hear your breath while you are going through those stages of your senses. You start to realize that connection of yourself when you're feeling intimate, but also with your partner in the future. So unfortunately, no sex is involved, but the stages of intimacy that are that beautiful component of sex is definitely involved in the bodywork practice.
Fantastic. Involved dived into and discussed, and hopefully a person can take away tools to utilize in their life, and that will promote health for them overall, right? That connection can help promote health because it will be reflected in the rest of their lives.
Yes, because in the beginning, especially of my sexual journey, that I think that I would say maybe like a lot of people feel, it's just this physical journey. Like, I just want to come. That's it. That's it. I just want to
I
come.
crave pleasure. I crave pleasure. This is a
Yeah.
thing that I can get pleasure from. I'm going to go for that thing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's just like, I just need to reach that, and then that's it. And I think that there is this gap and wave of like, this sense of like, okay, what does it take you to get there, and why do you need that? What does it come in? Sex is such a pleasurable experience. It's a beautiful experience, and that's why there's more humans on this earth, right? The co-creation aspect of it, all of these elements of it. And so I feel like my goal is to be able to find those depths and layers for people, to be able to see and to witness. And then also that connection to your body for people like myself who've had experienced trauma revolving around sex, knowing that it's not just that physical, that there are layers and components to it that we can go into and find ease and pleasure to it, and in a sense, find those pockets of pleasurable experience within the aspect of sex and sensuality itself.
Gina Joseph is a sensualist, intimacy guide, yoga teacher operating out of Miami, Florida currently, but have skill set, will travel. GinaJoseph.me is the website. I want to thank you so much for taking time to visit with me and helping educate and inform and enlighten and bring this joy to people in the way that you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And also, just to anyone out there, there's been something that's called for me to say: enjoy the journey and enjoy the process. Whether you are discovering psychedelics for the first time, whether you are discovering your sexual journey, your sensual journey, or even if you're discovering yourself, your business, enjoy the process of where it's going, and it's all unraveling in the divine. And I want to thank you so much again, Matthew, for holding space for this conversation.
You got it. Talk again soon.
Bye.